Hello. My name's Evander, and if you'd told me my own family would turn my brother's wedding into the day they finally erased me, I might have believed you. Just not how far they'd go. They told people I liked the attention, that the chair was convenient for me, until my stepfather shoved me out of it in front of everyone and laughed. My mother said I should have stayed home. Guests chuckled like it was nothing. But the worst part wasn't the fall. It was realizing they planned it. And as I lay there on the floor, trying to breathe through the pain, none of them noticed the one man who knew the truth, my doctor, standing right behind them, listening to every lie they told. What he said next, those 5 quiet words, ended everything. But before I tell you what happened after that, let me show you how a family like mine breaks a person long before the fall. Something in the air told me I should have turned around right then. I should have listened to that instinct, but instead I pushed myself deeper into the crowd. The parking lot outside the venue was already filling up when I rolled my chair out of the rideshare van. Houston's heat pressed against my neck, the kind that made you sweat even before you reached the door. I paused for a second, adjusted my wheels, then headed inside. The lobby was bright and busy, full of flowers, chatter, and people rushing to make everything perfect. One of the staff members welcomed me with a warm smile, asking if I needed help. I thanked her and kept moving. It was always easier to do things myself. That little moment of kindness almost made me forget the knot in my stomach, but it tightened right back up the second I saw my mother. Marla spotted me from across the room. Her expression didn't soften. It tightened. She walked toward me with that polite smile she wore in public, the one that never reached her eyes. "You look worn out, Evander. Maybe you should have stayed home," she murmured while straightening her dress. There it was, the first strike of the day. A reminder that my presence was more burden than comfort. I answered her with a quiet, "I'm fine," even though I knew she wasn't asking out of care. It was a warning disguised as concern. Keep small. Don't cause trouble. Don't get in the way. Twist S1 delivered with the same gentle tone she used when telling people the weather looked nice. I adjusted my navy pocket square, making sure it sat neatly against my suit jacket. It was the one detail I wanted to get right today. Before I could settle it, Marla reached down and pulled it out without a word. She pressed it back into my palm. "This is too much. You don't need anything that draws attention." The words cut deeper than she probably realized, or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. Twist S2 echoed right through her voice, stripping away one more sliver of dignity. I folded the pocket square and rested it on my lap, pretending it didn't matter. I moved forward as the hallway opened into the pre-ceremony area where family photos were being arranged. Everyone looked polished, excited, full of purpose. I scanned the clipboard the coordinator held, looking for my name. It wasn't there, not under immediate family, not anywhere. I didn't ask about it. I just swallowed the small burn in my chest and eased back a little, giving space to people who clearly expected me to play the background. Again. Declan stood near the photographer, laughing with our stepfather, Corbin Slate. The two of them looked like they'd been sharing some private joke. Corbin noticed me and gave a short glance in my direction, more of a quick evaluation than a greeting. His eyes moved on just as fast. I was used to that look, but it still landed like a stone. While everyone arranged themselves, the wedding planner pulled Marla aside. Her voice carried enough for me to hear. "Is Evander meant to be in the processional?" Marla hesitated only a breath before replying, "No, he's just attending." just attending, as if I wasn't Declan's brother, as if I wasn't family at all. I pretended to check my phone, pretending I hadn't heard. That sinking feeling settled deeper, thick and familiar. I wheeled myself toward a quieter corner near a side hallway. People walked past, stepping around me like I was part of the furniture. I told myself to stay calm, keep steady. Declan wanted me here. That was enough. Or that's what I kept repeating, hoping it would feel true. Minutes passed. The sounds of guests arriving grew louder. I could feel something shifting around me, like the air itself was warning me the day wasn't done hurting yet. Still, I stayed. I wasn't ready to walk away from my brother's wedding, even if no one else seemed to care I'd shown up. But as I watched the distance growing between me and the rest of them, I felt that old knot tighten again. The one that always reminded me my place in this family had been negotiated for years without my consent. Something in the atmosphere told me more was coming. Something worse. And yet I stayed right where I was, holding that wrinkled navy pocket square in my hand, hoping the day would turn itself around. Something in the air told me I should have turned around right then, but I moved farther into the hall anyway. The music had shifted to a soft instrumental piece, and guests were drifting toward the photography area. I followed the flow, keeping my pace steady so I wouldn't accidentally clip anyone's heels. The noise rose the closer I got. Laughter, camera shutters, the click of high heels on polished floors. All of it blended together, and none of it was directed at me. I eased toward the crowd, doing my best to look relaxed. If I looked calm, maybe I'd feel calm. I tried to remind myself that showing up mattered, even if no one had planned for me to be part of anything. Still, unease crept in, tracing a line down my spine as I approached the setup for family photos. Near the front, a small folding table held a printed shot list. Every grouping was laid out neatly: parents, siblings, extended family, bridesmaids. My eyes scanned down, searching for my name. It wasn't there. I checked again, slower this time. Still nothing. I pushed a little closer to a cousin standing nearby. "Hey," I asked gently, "do you know where I'm supposed to be for these photos?" He blinked as if the question surprised him. "I think they're doing immediate family first," he said, already turning away. The words dropped like a stone. I nodded even though he wasn't looking anymore. Immediate family. A category I should have belonged to without question. The photographer noticed me hovering and offered a polite smile. "Would you like to join this one?" he asked, motioning toward the group being arranged. Before I could answer, Corbin stepped forward. "He'll sit this one out," he said smoothly. "We've already got a full frame. Don't want to crowd the shot." The photographer hesitated, clearly unsure, but Corbin held a reassuring smile that carried authority. I backed away on my own, not wanting to create friction. It was easier to retreat quietly than to press the issue and become the problem. As I rolled back, my wheel nudged the corner of a decorative table. A soft rattle of glassware followed. I apologized under my breath and corrected my position. There really wasn't space for me, not just emotionally. Physically, the layout didn't account for my chair at all. It wasn't an accident. It was a message wrapped in practicality. I told myself they probably just overlooked the details, but deep down, the truth pulsed heavier. They hadn't forgotten. They had arranged things around me, leaving me nowhere to stand or sit. Trying to give everyone room, I aimed for a section near the guest seating. Once I reached it, I realized the chair meant for me had been placed right by a service door. Staff passed through with trays of glasses and boxes of decorations. The spot felt more like storage than seating. I slowed to a stop as Corbin's voice sounded behind me. "This works better. Keeps you out of the walkway." His tone was casual, as if he'd offered a simple favor. I kept my face neutral, keeping my response stored deep inside. Humiliation has a way of settling quietly when you're used to it. Before I could reposition, a small voice spoke near my elbow. Olive, the young girl I recognized from a branch of the family, looked up at me with open curiosity. "Why is your chair way back here? Did you get in trouble?" Her innocence made the question sharper than anything the adults had said. "No, sweetheart," I answered softly. "I'm just sitting here for a moment." She nodded, seeming satisfied, and skipped away. Her honesty left a deeper sting than any insult. Children see things clearly. They just name what adults pretend not to notice. I adjusted my position again, angling myself enough that I wouldn't block the staff moving through the door. That's when I saw Declan across the room. He noticed me too. His hand lifted halfway, as if he wanted to come over, but he hesitated. Corbin laid a hand on his shoulder, guiding him back toward the photographer. Declan followed without protest. That moment lodged itself beneath my ribs. He was close enough to reach, but it felt like we were standing on opposite sides of a wall I didn't build. I watched from a distance while the photos continued. The bright flashes, the proud poses, the effortless smiles. There was a gap in one arrangement where anyone looking with an open heart would place a brother. But someone else stepped into it without hesitation, filling the space before anyone felt the absence. I kept my expression controlled, but my fingers curled around the navy pocket square in my lap. I couldn't bring myself to unfold it. Holding it tight was the only thing keeping me steady. A few minutes passed before I heard Corbin speaking to another guest nearby. "He likes attention," he said lightly. "This setup keeps things simple for everyone." He said it calmly, as though it were a generous explanation instead of a quiet cut. My chest tightened hard enough to make breathing feel like a task. I looked away from the photo area, not trusting my face to stay composed. The shame worked its way under my skin, settling deeper with each breath. That was the moment I realized they didn't just forget me. They planned around me. And with that settling in my chest, I rolled toward the quieter cocktail area, hoping distance would help me breathe again. The noise behind me softened the farther I went, turning into a backdrop instead of a weight pressing on my shoulders. People milled around the small bar, greeting each other with warm touches and familiar smiles. None of those gestures reached me. When someone's gaze drifted in my direction, it skimmed past me just as quickly. I found a spot near a tall decorative plant and paused, taking in the room. One relative I recognized approached the bar, glanced toward me, and immediately turned her shoulder so she wouldn't have to acknowledge me. Another offered a tight grin that didn't reach her eyes before stepping farther into the crowd. Small things, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, but they lined up into a clear message. While I watched them, a voice carried from the group near the far wall. Someone said to Declan, "Your stepdad must be proud, raising such successful sons." The words hit harder than they should have. My breath stalled halfway. I focused on that sentence, replaying it in my mind. Successful sons, plural, but not meant for me. A memory I usually kept buried rose before I could push it back down. I hadn't thought about the attic in years, and not in detail. But the image came back sharp. The narrow wooden ladder, the unfinished insulation, the faint dust hanging in the air that afternoon. Corbin had insisted the job needed to be done before the boys come home. His exact words. I told him I didn't feel steady enough on the ladder. He waved off my concerns, saying, "You're fine, just get it done." He headed downstairs to take a call, leaving me balancing on the highest step. I remember asking him to wait. He didn't. The slip was quick. 1 second, I was reaching for a box. The next, the ladder rocked, and everything went black before I hit the ground. I woke up to voices shouting my name, and a pain so deep I couldn't even turn my head. At the hospital, I heard Corbin loudly tell my mother, "He wasn't watching where he stepped. He needs to pay attention." Those words became the family's version of events, easier for them to repeat than acknowledging he'd left me alone when I shouldn't have been. I remembered lying there, unable to move my legs, while they murmured things like, "He has to be more careful," and "He should have known better." That lie shaped the way they treated me from then on, a quiet rewriting of my identity, less capable, less reliable, someone who made trouble for himself. Standing in the cocktail area now, I could feel the old narrative still circling me like a shadow. Declan laughing with guests, Corbin shaking hands, receiving compliments as though he was the backbone of this family. The contrast between then and now blurred together. Nothing had changed. Not really. I pushed myself toward two aunts chatting near the corner. Their conversation paused the instant I arrived. One of them shifted her wine glass and gave me a small, stiff smile. "We were just talking about Declan's promotion," she said gently. "You wouldn't follow all that IT security stuff, honey." The subtle pat on my dignity stung more than if she had said it outright. They turned back toward each other, closing the circle. The message was clear. I wasn't meant to be part of the conversation. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I rolled back a bit, giving them space. For a moment I wondered if Mom had been right. Maybe coming at all was a mistake. Maybe staying home would have spared me this avalanche of reminders. But another voice inside me rose just as quickly, firmer. No, not this time. I'd spent years swallowing things that should have been challenged, years letting others decide where I belonged. I felt something shift, small but new, a spark of defiance where helplessness usually lived. My hand brushed against the navy pocket square, resting in my lap. The fabric was worn in the corners from how often I handled it. My biological father had given it to me during one of his better months. I could still hear him saying, "When people push you out of the frame, build your own." I tightened my grip around it. That memory struck deeper than the pain right in front of me. It grounded me, reminded me that I came from someone who believed I was worth being seen. Before I could gather myself fully, a groomsman hurried across the room. "Ceremony line up in 5, he called. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Everyone on stage, except him." He didn't even glance my way when he said it. Just kept moving. I stayed still for a moment, letting the words sink into the space between my ribs. Excluded again, not by accident, but by design. That was when I understood. They weren't done with me yet. That realization stayed with me as I turned toward the hallway where the ceremony lineup was forming. The crowd behind me shifted into a steady hum, the kind that reminded me of a distant highway. Everyone seemed to know where they needed to be. Everyone except me. I moved forward, keeping to the right so I wouldn't block anyone. Members of the wedding party hurried past with bouquets, garment bags, or makeup kits. No one paused to ask if I needed direction, not even a glance. The pressure inside my chest rose, sharp and tight. I needed to be included in the family seating at the very least. I couldn't shake that thought. It circled my mind like a nervous heartbeat. As I followed the hallway, I rolled past a table stacked with small speakers and cables. A technician stood behind a screen, previewing the slideshow that would play before the ceremony. The movement on the monitor pulled my attention. Childhood pictures flicked across the display, Declan in a baseball uniform, me next to him with a fishing pole, Mom smiling behind us, our family before everything changed. But something felt wrong. The shift was subtle at first, like catching a wrong note in a familiar song. Then I noticed it clearly. In 3 of the group photos, my place was replaced by more background scenery. No blur, no sloppy cutout. Clean, intentional. My breath stalled. I leaned closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "You edited me out?" The technician didn't look up. The bride asked for consistency. Immediate family only. Those words landed with a sickening weight. Immediate family only. The idea that my absence made things look more presentable stung deeper than I expected. Another image appeared, a photo of me and Declan holding a fish twice the size of our arms. We were 8 and 10. Our father had taken that picture on a camping trip. Declan's arm had been around my shoulder. On the screen, his arm rested around empty air. I backed away from the monitor, feeling the hallway tilt slightly. I gripped my wheels until my palms hurt, steadying myself while the technician clicked through more images that no longer held me in them. I forced myself to keep moving down the hall. I needed to hear something real from my mother, anything that made sense of this. I found her near a full-length mirror, applying lipstick with slow, steady strokes. She didn't look at me when I approached. "Why am I not in the photos?" I asked. She paused only long enough to press her lips together, smoothing the color. "Evander, today isn't about you. Don't start something. Please." Her tone was soft, but every syllable dismissed me like a chore she didn't want to finish. I waited for more, hoping she'd add something kinder. She didn't. She walked away, leaving the scent of her perfume lingering where she'd stood. A few steps farther down the hall stood a large printed seating chart for the front pews. I scanned the names quickly. My mother, Declan, Corbin, members of the bride's family. But where my name should have been, there was only a decorative curl of gold foil, a placeholder that wasn't meant for a person, just an empty flourish. A cousin walked by, slowing when he noticed me staring at the chart. "They said it's simpler this way," he murmured, eyes darting toward the floor. He kept moving before I could answer. Simpler. That single word cut more than any insult. Ahead of me, Corbin's voice rose above the hallway noise. "Let's take the Holt family photo now. Just immediate family. Marla, Declan, me." I stopped. Mom stepped into place beside him. Declan joined them, adjusting his jacket as though everything was completely normal. The photographer looked around. "Is everyone here?" "Yes," Corbin said. "Everyone who matters." The words slammed into me. I felt something inside me shift, not collapse, but tighten, break, then grow sharper. I rolled back a few feet, far enough that no one would notice if I stayed silent. I needed the space. Questions rushed through my head. How much more could they take? What else did they plan to strip away? I reached instinctively for the pocket square resting in my lap. The small square of navy fabric warmed under my fingers. My father's voice echoed from a place I rarely visited. Dignity isn't something people give. It's something people try to take. "You won't take the last piece of me," I whispered, barely audible. An usher rushed down the hall, shouting directions. "Everyone to your places. Groom's family on the left." He glanced at me and hesitated. Your seat is down by the aisle, the one near the service entrance." For a moment, I could only stare at him. No words found their way out. That was the moment I realized they planned my humiliation down to the chair I would sit in. That thought stayed with me as I turned toward the ceremony hall, following the usher's gesture, even though every instinct told me not to. The hallway widened into the main entrance, where soft music played and guests began settling into their seats. The room looked beautiful, warm, inviting. But the path they carved out for me led somewhere else entirely. I moved along the left aisle, following the narrow space the usher had indicated. When I reached the spot meant for me, I stopped. It wasn't a seat at all. It was a tiny gap beside the service door, where staff kept slipping in and out carrying trays, folding chairs, and carts stacked with glassware. The door swung open every few moments, letting out bursts of clattering plates and rushed voices. "This wasn't an accident," I whispered. It came out steadier than I expected. The angle where they'd placed me didn't even face the ceremony. Everyone else got to look forward, toward the flowers and candles and soft lighting. My view was a patch of wall and the backs of people who didn't know I existed. Maybe that was the point. Keep me out of sight. Keep me quiet. A small voice broke the tension around me. "Why are you sitting back here?" I turned to see Olive, the little girl who had wandered past me earlier. She wore a small bracelet made of tiny flowers, the kind kids love because it makes them feel grown. She looked at me with clear curiosity. "Are you in trouble?" I forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, I'm not." She frowned, confused. "But they put all the important people in the front." I didn't answer at first. That honesty hit harder than anything the adults had said all day. "Sometimes grown-ups forget things," I told her gently. She nodded the way children do when they don't fully understand but trust you enough to accept your explanation. A woman called her name, and she hurried off, leaving me in a silence that suddenly felt louder. I straightened myself, trying to preserve whatever dignity I still carried. I took the navy pocket square from my lap and smoothed it with my thumb. "Just get through the ceremony," I murmured. But my breath wouldn't settle. My pulse felt tight, my chest too small for my lungs. Guests started to rise as the music shifted. The procession began. I watched Declan appear at the far end of the aisle, moving with that poised confidence he'd always had. For a moment, he turned his head toward where I sat. His eyes widened just a bit, like he hadn't expected to see me in this corner. Before he could change direction, Corbin placed a firm hand on his back, guiding him forward. Declan didn't resist. He let himself be steered away. A staff member carrying a stack of dishes clipped the side of my chair. The jolt shook me. "Sorry, man," he said quickly. He struggled to squeeze past. "They shouldn't have seated you here." I nodded. I knew. Everybody knew. But only he said it out loud. I tried to recenter myself, gripping the armrest and breathing slow. Then I felt someone step up behind me. The shift in the air told me who it was, even before he spoke. Corbin leaned down, his voice low and sharp. "Don't start looking pitiful now. Declan doesn't need your drama." I turned my head slightly. "I'm not causing anything." He tightened his hand on the wheelchair handle, then stopped drawing eyes. I didn't have time to respond. In one sudden, violent motion, he shoved the chair forward. The world tilted. My body pitched out of the seat, and the floor hit me hard on my side. Gasps rippled across the room. The music faltered for a beat. My palms scraped the tile as I tried to stabilize myself, pain shooting down my back. Corbin's voice boomed over me, loud enough for every guest to hear. Stop faking for attention. Get up. A few people let out awkward laughs, unsure how to react. The sound sliced through me. From the front row, my mother didn't even stand. She simply shook her head and said, "You should have stayed home." I didn't move. Couldn't. My breath came in shallow bursts and the room blurred at the edges. I pressed my hand to the floor, trying to push myself upright, but my body refused to cooperate. The shame in the air was thick enough to choke me. Then, above the noise, footsteps approached. Slow, steady, purposeful. Someone stopped behind me. A warm, calm voice cleared its throat, and that's when I realized my doctor had witnessed every second. That thought steadied me for a moment, even as my palms pressed against the cold floor and the wedding hall spun with whispers. The music had gone silent, leaving only the murmur of startled guests and the clatter of a dish someone dropped in the back. I lifted my head slightly, wincing. Standing behind me was Dr. Rowan Hale, my rehabilitation specialist, the man who had seen every step of my recovery and every setback since the accident. His expression didn't waver. His eyes were sharp, assessing the room, and then settling on me with a kind of focused concern I hadn't felt from family in years. People nearby didn't know whether to keep staring or pretend they hadn't seen anything. Some hid behind strained smiles. Some looked away. A few exchanged glances that asked silently, "Was that supposed to happen?" Shame burned through me again, but this time it mixed with something else. Relief that someone who mattered finally saw it. Rowan knelt beside me, his voice even and firm. "Don't try to move yet. Tell me where it hurts." Corbin let out a dismissive scoff behind him. "He's fine. He pulls this stunt all the time." Rowan didn't react to him. He kept his attention on me, pressing lightly along my shoulder and ribs. "Did you feel anything snap? Any numbness?" I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. "Lower back. Just give me a second." He nodded once, then rose to his full height. The room shifted with him. It was subtle, but guests leaned closer, watching him, his confidence cut through the uncertainty like a blade. That was when Twist S11 began. Rowan faced the crowd and spoke clearly, loud enough to reach the back rows. "Evander has a documented spinal injury. Any physical aggression toward him can cause permanent nerve damage." The words dropped into the room like stones. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "I didn't know." Marla crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. Corbin rolled his eyes in a dramatic arc, as if Rowan were performing a comedy routine instead of announcing a medical fact. Corbin took a step forward, trying to regain control. "Look, this isn't your clinic. He's being dramatic. He's used that chair to guilt us for years." Hearing him repeat that lie, the same one he'd used since the accident, hit a place inside me I didn't realize was still tender. But Rowan didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded document, my MRI summary from last month. He held it up so Corbin and Marla could see each highlighted line. "This is what's real," he said, his tone low and precise. "This is what happens when you stop pretending your son isn't hurt." A murmur rippled through the rows. People shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Someone whispered, "My God." Declan approached then, still in his groom's suit, looking conflicted and small. He rubbed a hand over his face. "Please," he said quietly. "Can we not do this? Not today." Rowan turned to him. "Your stepfather shoved a disabled man to the ground. The wedding is already disrupted. The only question is whether we acknowledge what happened. Declan's eyes darted away. I didn't see. You didn't want to see, Rowan replied. Declan stepped back like he'd been struck. Then Twist S12 arrived. A woman in the second row rose from her seat. I recorded the whole thing, she said, holding up her phone. Her voice was steady, not confrontational, just honest. For the first time all day, Corbin's confidence cracked. His expression stiffened, eyes narrowing at her. You need to delete that, now. No, she answered firmly. He was pushed. I watched it happen. The room shifted. Guests angled their bodies away from Corbin, as if something about him had become too volatile to stand near. Corbin exploded. You all think you know him? He lies. He always lies. He likes being broken. He likes the attention. His voice ricocheted off the walls, too loud, too unhinged. People winced. Even Marla glanced at him with unease. Still on the floor, I watched the mask slip off Corbin piece by piece. I watched the man who had shaped so much of my pain unravel in front of everyone, and instead of shrinking like I usually did, something inside me changed. A steady, quiet anger formed, clearer than any fear I'd felt all day. I thought, if I stay quiet now, this will never stop. The thought settled in my chest with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Rowan stayed beside me as I braced my palms against the floor, taking a breath to gather myself before pushing upright. My muscles trembled, but not from fear. More like something inside me had finally snapped free. With Rowan's support, I eased back into my chair and sat fully upright. The hall had gone so quiet that every shuffle of fabric, every click of a camera, seemed amplified. I locked my wheels and lifted my chin. Corbin, I said, projecting my voice across the room, you shoved me in front of everyone. You can't talk your way out of this. People turned toward me as if I'd pulled the cord on a curtain. Heads angled. A few guests actually leaned forward, waiting for whatever came next. Corbin stepped toward me slowly, like he was approaching a problem he'd solved 100 times before. His jaw tightened. You want to make a scene? Fine, let's tell them the truth. You milked that chair for sympathy. You always have. The words still hit hard, but not the way they used to. They didn't knock anything out of me this time. They bounced off something stronger. Rowan straightened beside me, his voice even. For the record, he said to the room, Evander's injury is not psychological. It isn't exaggerated. It is structural, measurable, and well documented. He has reduced lumbar stability and nerve compression, worsened by any sudden impact. A wave of whispers rolled through the crowd. A few phones lifted discreetly. Corbin's posture wavered. He was still standing tall, but his shoulders didn't look quite as squared. I steadied myself, fingers brushing the wheel rims. My voice dropped into something calmer. Mom. Marla's head jerked slightly. She'd been avoiding looking at me since the moment I hit the floor. You told people I exaggerate, I said. You told Declan I do this for attention. Do you really believe that? Her gaze flicked to her reflection in a decorative frame before she answered. I have a wedding to protect. Your issues can wait. That sentence hit harder than anything Corbin ever threw at me. Not because it was new, but because she said it without even looking at me. As if I were an inconvenience she needed to shift out of the frame. Guests shook their heads. A low murmur of disapproval spread through the rows. Declan looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. His bride touched his arm gently, as though grounding him. Before I could respond, another voice carried across the room. I need to say something. A man in a tan jacket stepped out from the back row. I recognized him vaguely. One of Corbin's former coworkers, someone I'd seen a few times at company barbecues. He walked toward us with a steady gait, eyes fixed on my stepfather. "I've seen him do this before," the man said. "Bully someone weaker to make himself feel bigger." The room erupted into sharp whispers. Corbin froze mid-breath. "Sit down," Corbin barked. "You don't know anything about this family. Stay out of it." But his voice cracked, and that crack was loud enough for everyone to hear. Phones came up. Guests taped instinctively. Declan's bride looked like she'd just realized she'd married into a storm. For me, something settled. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't collapse. This was clarity. I finally understood. This had never been about me being hurt. It was about them refusing to acknowledge the hurt at all, because if they acknowledged it, they'd have to admit their part in it. I inhaled, letting the weight of the moment pull me to my next words. When I spoke, my voice didn't tremble. I've spent my whole life trying not to upset people who never cared if they hurt me. The hush that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a shift, like the energy in the room had tilted toward me instead of away. Rowan turned his head slightly and caught my eye. He gave a small nod. It wasn't encouragement. It wasn't pity. It was permission. Permission I didn't even realize I'd been waiting on. For the first time, I felt the balance tip. I wasn't smaller than the moment. I wasn't being pushed out of the frame. I was taking my place in it, and I knew exactly what I needed to say next. And that's when I revealed the one truth my family never expected me to say. The moment the words left my mouth, the air shifted. People leaned in. Phones lifted a little higher. Even the music humming faintly from the speakers seemed to fade out. I could feel every heartbeat in the room lining up with mine. I steadied my breathing, let the silence settle, then said clearly, "You all keep calling me a liar. Fine. My doctor is here. Ask him what he told me last month." A murmur ran through the hall. I saw Marla freeze, her hand hovering near her necklace. Corbin narrowed his eyes like he was trying to calculate where I was going with this. Declan took a half step closer, his face pale, unsure which side to land on. Rowan stepped forward, his expression tight. He took a measured breath before speaking. "If Evander experiences one more fall with the force I just witnessed, he may permanently lose the ability to walk. Completely." A collective gasp swept through the room like a gust of wind. Chairs creaked as people shifted. Someone whispered, "Oh my goodness!" Corbin scoffed immediately, shaking his head. "Scare tactics. He's just trying to stir up emotion." Rowan didn't blink. Medical fact. That shut the whispers down. A few guests looked at Corbin as if they were seeing him for the first time. I reached into the side pocket of my chair and pulled out an envelope. My hand shook, not from fear. This time it was anger. Controlled. Focused. "This," I said, raising it, "is the physical therapy progress report you all ignored." Then I lifted a second document, edges worn from being handled so many times. "And this is the police report draft I filed but never submitted." Faces changed instantly. A few jaws dropped. I heard someone mutter, "Oh my lord." Corbin's eyes went wide. He lunged forward faster than I expected, snatching the envelope out of my hand. Before anyone could react, he tore it clean in half. The sound ripped through the hall like a crack of lightning. "You think papers change anything?" he snapped. The guests gasped again, this time louder. Phones flew up. Marla clutched his arm, her voice sharp but hushed. "Stop. They're filming. Stop now. But he didn't stop. His breathing was wild, shoulders raised, face blotched in red. I'd seen him angry many times, but never cornered. That was when Declan finally moved. He stepped between us, hands up. Dad, stop. Just stop. He used the word dad out of habit, but even he seemed startled by it. His voice cracked as he turned toward me. Ev, I should have protected you. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what to say, because for the first time all day, someone in my family had actually taken a step in my direction. Right then, Rowan stepped forward with a calm so sharp it felt like a blade. He squared his shoulders, faced the entire room, and said 5 words that ended everything. I'm calling Adult Protective Services. Silence. Absolute silence. It was as if the entire wedding froze mid-breath. Marla's face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. Corbin's expression twisted, then cracked open. Guests shifted away from him. A few whispered, "Is that abuse?" They shoved him. He's disabled. Corbin tried to regain control, but whatever power he'd carried into that hall was gone. "You can't do that," he shouted. "You don't know this family." But the more he yelled, the smaller he looked. 2 guests instinctively stepped between him and Rowan. Someone near the aisle said, "Sir, calm down. People saw what happened." Another guest added, "It's assault, plain as day." Corbin swung toward the voices, but it wasn't strength anymore. It was panic. For the first time, I didn't feel smaller than him, not even close. I adjusted my posture, placed my hand over the pocket where the torn documents had been, and looked around the hall. Every face was turned toward me, not with pity, not with discomfort, but with recognition. "I didn't come here to ruin a wedding," I said, my voice steady. "I came to watch my brother get married, and you," I looked straight at Corbin, then at Marla, "made a spectacle out of my existence." Several guests nodded, a few wiped their eyes. One woman whispered, "He deserves better." I let the moment settle, let the truth land where it needed to. Then, faintly, through the tall front windows, I saw blue and red lights reflecting against the glass. Someone had already called the police. Half the room turned toward the glow, whispering. I didn't. I closed my eyes, letting the weight finally lift off my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. And what came next changed everything for all of us. Those flashing lights outside the hall were only the beginning. The officers stepped through the doorway with steady strides, and the crowd instinctively made room for them. The music, which someone had tried to restart out of panic, went silent again. You could feel the entire building shift from chaos to a strange, heavy quiet. I stayed where I was, still close to the ground, leaning slightly against my chair until Rowan helped me settle back into it. My breathing steadied, though my chest still felt tight. I wasn't shaken anymore, just tired. Deep down tired, the kind that comes from years of holding everything in. The officers approached Corbin first. He tried to stand tall, but his voice cracked when he said, "There's been a misunderstanding." Then he noticed half the room holding their phones up. His words dried up. One officer asked him to step aside, and he did, but not gracefully. He barked something at Marla, but an officer gently separated them, guiding her toward another corner. I watched it all happen without a sense of triumph or revenge, only a quiet, heavy calm, like a chapter ending whether I was ready or not. Declan approached me slowly. His tie hung loose, his face blotched with stress. He looked like a man who'd been hit from 3 directions at once. "Ev," he said softly, "I should have stood up for you years ago." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if I wanted to comfort him or let him feel the weight of what he'd ignored. He rubbed the back of his neck, voice cracking. I let him decide what kind of brother I was. I shouldn't have. I nodded. A small gesture. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. A place to start from, maybe. Or a place to end. Marla came next. She moved like someone walking through water. Her eyes were glassy, but her expression wasn't one of remorse. It was confusion, fear, and pride all knotted together. "I didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. I held her gaze. "You didn't want to know." She staggered back as if the words were a physical shove. No argument, no excuses. She just blinked at me, mouth slightly open, then looked away. There was nothing left to say between us. Rowan crouched next to me again, calmer now. "You did something tonight you weren't ready for," he said. His tone wasn't scolding. It was the kind of voice people use when they finally see you as more than a patient, someone trying to survive something bigger than a diagnosis. I nodded, letting the truth of it sink in. "It wasn't about exposing them," he continued. "It was about showing up for yourself." I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot that had been there so long I barely noticed it anymore. One of the officers approached us, giving a quick update. "Mr. Holt, we'll be detaining your stepfather for the night. There will be an investigation. You may want to finalize that report." "You drafted." I didn't give an answer. This wasn't about punishing Corbin, not anymore. This was about choosing something for myself for the first time. I turned toward my family, my mother, my brother, and said quietly, "I'm stepping back. I need space. Real space." Marla inhaled sharply, ready to protest, but Declan reached out and touched her arm. He shook his head. For once, she stayed silent. I didn't make a dramatic exit. No speeches. I simply turned my chair toward the far side of the hall and moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Each push of the wheels felt like peeling something off my body that had been stuck there too long. The hall's side door opened easily, and the evening air rushed in. Cool. Soft. Honest. I rolled outside and let the sounds fade behind me. The officers talking, the whispers, the nervous reshuffling of chairs. The night felt wider than anything inside that room. I took a long breath, the kind that shakes on the way out. Not from sadness, more like clearing smoke from a room you've lived in too long. Then I noticed the navy pocket square resting on my lap, the one I'd kept straight earlier to look presentable. It was wrinkled now, a little dusty, but it felt lighter than before. I smoothed it with my palm, realizing it didn't represent who I was trying to impress anymore. It represented who I wanted to protect, myself. Rowan stepped outside after a minute or two. He leaned against the wall beside me, hands in his coat pockets. "You hungry?" he asked. I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Starving," I said. We started moving toward the parking lot together, street lamps casting a soft glow over the pavement. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I didn't know what the investigation would bring. I didn't know if my family would ever be whole again, or if that was even something I wanted. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of choosing a path that wasn't built around their comfort. I was choosing for me.